Recording in progress.
Go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call. McKee here, Schultz.
Here.
Bottoма.
Present.
Behrenkamp.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Perfect. If you'd like to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, agenda approval. Is there anything from staff?
Yes, staff is requesting that council, that we add item 10F, which is a resolution of support. We were made aware of some funding that we might be able to receive through the community funding projects program, and we're looking at proceeding forward with that. So in front of you, there is a resolution of support for that we're looking to move forward with item 10F. And then we do have several items on the agenda that were a few additional revised items that are on the dais, all of which are in the packet out front. But with that,
Mr. Mayor, I had an item I would like to add to agenda item 8, preferably before the Wright-Hennepin substation, to discuss the zoning of the properties around that area, that I think might be helpful as we discuss what the appropriate screening mechanism might be. So I've asked staff to prepare a couple of slides.
You want to just...
I'd like to insert that as 8A, and then shift Wright-Hennepin to 8B.
Okay. Yeah, that's... Perfect.
Do we have to approve that?
Yes, we do. Give me 1 second, just so I get my notes first. All right, is there anything else? Perfect. Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Commission representatives, we have Mark Lanterman from Planning and Val Nybo from Parks and Trails, potentially online.
she may be online.
Sounds good.
Not yet.
Okay, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll go right into open forum, and Jessica can walk us through that.
Perfect. Anyone interested in joining us for open forum in the audience can come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Anyone joining us virtually can press star 9 if you're on a phone. Otherwise, click reactions and raise your hand if you're joining us from a computer, tablet, or smartphone. Mayor, at this time, we don't have anyone raising their hand virtually.
Perfect. And we will go into item 6, which is presentations. We have 3 from each of our fire departments for the annual reports, and I believe Rogers is going to go first. Does that work?
That works.
Perfect. All right, Chief.
That works for me.
Floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Brad Feist. I'm the fire chief for the city of Rogers. To give you some history on Rogers, we cover not just the city of Rogers, but a portion of Corcoran and a portion of Siegel. So tonight I have our 2021 annual report, and I'll just go through a few of the bullet items, some of the pie charts, and then if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask. So number 2 is just page number 2 is our mission statement. And then number 3 is just a letter from me on behalf of the Rogers Fire Department and my members. Again, we're still dealing with the great COVID experience. Our guys, our men and women did a great job on changing protocols, on responding to calls, responding to the station, reporting exposure rates and things of that. We've coming around the corner right now and trying to get back together as a full department. We were in small groups and doing our training, but COVID changed a lot of things, but we did not hamper our quick response to the needs of the public in our communities. Page 5 is basically the inspection permit activity for the city of Rogers only. My deputy fire marshal Chris, who's also full-time like myself, does a lot of these permits. These are the permits that she deals with on a day-to-day basis, from fire sprinklers to fire alarms to we even do our burn permits. We go out and visit those before we issue permits. So showing kind of her activity throughout the year. This does not include any inspections of existing buildings. This is just really any permits that come through the system that she has to review and then submit it for COs and burn permits. One thing that we've been working on the last couple of years is improving is our fire prevention program. Chris and Lieutenant Morgando and a couple of my firefighters put during Fire Prevention Week during October 3rd to the 9th a lot of hours through our school programs, our private schools. We estimate that we reached out to about 450 kids during that 1 week period, which is a lot of students, and to talk about fire prevention and fire safety. Again, we did our National Night Out for the seniors. We kind of separated a little bit from the National Night Out. For the neighborhoods, we wanted to touch base with the seniors, so we've got three or four apartment buildings that's 55 and older. We did some senior reach out programs for them. And then again, we went into a whole bunch of things with the high school teams going to state championships. We would lead them out onto 94 with our fire trucks and wave them off, and hopefully they come back with a trophy. Sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. So, and then we did participate in the Corcoran Demo Derby with the 9/11 tribute. And then in fire investigations, investigations are when we have a fire and we have to do an investigation to try to find the cause. We do a lot of stuff through the Hennepin County Fire Investigation Team. But Chris, as a deputy fire marshal, has now been certified, so she does a lot of my fires investigations in the city of Rogers only, which has helped paperwork and keeping the process going. So just a couple of pictures of the activities that we were involved with in 2021. The next one, number 7, is our National Night Out, which again is really for meeting your neighbors, reaching out to the kids, going out to huge block parties. And it's just a great night in August, and we plan on doing that again in 2022. Page 8 is just some of the training activities that we accomplished in 2021. I'll let you guys kind of read that thing, but in the fire service for all 3 fire departments and fire departments across the nation, it's all about training. The equipment that we have on our trucks, we need to know how to use them. It doesn't do us any good if we reach in a cabinet and we have to do something and we don't know how to use the equipment. So we train a lot with the equipment that we have in our trucks, plus everything else on top of that. So 9, we just a couple pictures showing we did some elevator training, and then we did some special training with our officers, my 10 officers, my deputy chiefs, captains, and lieutenants on incident command and command training. We broke out into small groups and worked a lot on command, and then we brought the whole membership in and did a joint training with everyone after the officers were trained in incident command training for dealing with, on the scene and the incident command structure and the deck and divisions and all that kind of good stuff that we have to have. We have to know the terminology to get the job done. Page number 10, basically it's call volume by history. In 2021, we hit 692 calls for service. For 2022, we're already at about 250 calls already to the middle of April. So we're starting to see an uptick. And a lot of our uptick we are seeing is in the smoke detectors and seal detectors in your homes as they get older. They're getting cobwebs in them. They're faulting. So we're starting to see an uptick in that. Number 11, the next 2 slides are just kind of time of this is the days. So it's pretty across the board, kind of even. But again, it looks like Monday was 100. We had 113 calls on Monday. And then the time of day kind of hits us from that 8 o'clock in the morning to about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and which is a good thing, but it just kind of breaks it out by time of day for those calls. And then in slide number 13 is this is our fire and EMS call activity. Kind of breaks it out into some categories here. From fires to PI accidents to EMS to hazmat situations. Again, we get into false alarms or false calls. And then we get down into severe weather and natural disasters and that type of thing. So that kind of gives you a breakdown. Our EMS calls, again, were 47% of our total call volume. We respond to 7 CAT events which through Hennepin County Dispatch. And so that is always, EMS for all fire service is always a big number with our service area.
You said, I just want to interrupt for a second. You
Sure.
said 7 CAD events?
So in Hennepin County, yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
So in Hennepin County Sheriff, every event is classified as a CAD event, and it goes into CAD. So when a call comes in, let's say it's a PI accident, personal injury accident, when she types that in, or he types that in, when he hits enter, it notifies Rogers Fire, Rogers PD, Corcoran PD, and North EMS. That's a CAD, that's one CAD event. So, and there's a lot of CAD events that you could be responding to, but we just go to the 7 that, most of them are cardiac arrests, amputations, childbirth, if they're trapped, falls, but our PD and your PD answers the other majority of those calls. If they're busy, they, like for a lift assist, we're seeing a kind of an uptick in lift assist. They would just say, hey, start Rogers Fire, and we'll go to Corcoran, we'll go to Otsego, and we will go to Rogers if needed, so. Next slide on page 14 is basically the calls by city. In 2021, Corcoran, we had 81 responses. Our LSU trailer, that's our life safety trailer, that's our rehab trailer. That basically goes to other cities for rehab. In the fire service, rehab is very, very important from the standpoint of when a firefighter can go back and start doing active duty at a fire. They do one cycle, so they go in, they fight the fire, they come out. The first thing they do is they go to the LSU. We check for blood pressure, we check for oxygen levels, we check respirations. If they're on the charts after 20-some minutes, they can go back in again or go back to command. If they're off the charts, North paramedics are right next to us, and they usually take them in to be checked out. There's something going on. So there are 8 of those trailers in Hennepin County. We've had our trailer since 2004, and basically it's a rehab trailer for the firefighters to make sure that they're safe and they're healthy to go back and do active duty. Page 15, this is for the city of Corcoran, kind of a breakdown. Again, 50.6 or 51% was medical response that we did in the city of Corcoran. Excuse me. False alarms, again, we're starting to see an uptick. We're about 20. It just gives you a breakdown of the calls that we respond to in the city of Corcoran. And then Otsego, we respond to 59 calls for service in the city of Otsego. Gives kind of a breakdown. Again, EMS is the high volume of calls in Otsego. And then our mutual aid partners, again, our LSU is a mutual aid, so we take that to other cities. But for the most part, it's fires where we've gone into Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, Elk River, Edina, and we use them as an auto aid for us also. When we have big events, they come to our city and provide engines and manpower to help us fight the fires. And the last one is page 18. That's basically the breakdown for the city of Rogers. So in the city of Rogers, we had 517 calls that we responded to. And EMS was at about a 47%. But it just kind of goes through and shows you the calls. Again, we're starting to see that uptick on false alarms and false calls. That 21% probably 5 or 6 years ago was probably in the single digits. So we're starting to see the false calls that we have to respond to. And with the growth in all of our communities, it's not just the smoke detectors, it's also the sprinkler systems and the fire alarm panels and the commercial industrial buildings. So that is my report for tonight. Have any questions, comments?
Go right ahead.
An opportunity for advertising. How often should we change our fire detector, smoke detector seal?
Your batteries? Well, the
Batteries is time change, but
yeah, batteries should be twice a year.
Life
You tell
on-
people when you turn back your clocks or put your clocks forward.
Yep.
Smoke detector is usually 10 years.
Okay.
And a CO detector is usually 7 years. My recommendation on CO detectors, like the ones I have in my house, have a digital readout, so you can see what
Yep.
parts per million is activating that. If you look on the back of your smoke detector, it will tell the date of manufacturer. It's amazing how many ones that I pull off the ceilings and there's no date on there. That means they're like 15 or 20
Right.
years old and they're still being used. So,
I'm aware of it, very much aware of
Sure.
it. I can't invest in it enough because I live out in the rural portion and stuff, but for everybody listening, everybody here, share that with everybody, please. Change those frequently. Change the batteries at least, please.
Yep,
That helps all of you guys a lot.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Regarding your EMS calls?
Yes.
What type of vehicle are you rolling for that? You're not rolling a full engine, are you? You have a smaller
No.
specialized vehicle?
So for Station 1, we have a 3/4 ton pickup with a topper on it that carries all our medical bags in there. It holds 4 firefighters. And then at our Station 2, we have a Suburban that carries 4 firefighters and all the medical equipment. And basically, that's the main primary responsibility of those small vehicles, is to respond. We really don't want to be pulling the engines out, and responding, because we're starting to see backup calls. We could be on an EMS call, and then the next thing you know, we get a house fire or something else. So, and the engines have a lot of equipment on there. So our trucks are full of defibs and medical supplies and backboards and anything you can imagine. So that's basically how we respond to medical calls.
Okay. Matt, can I ask you, is that what's recommended in our fire plan in the stage 1? Is it similar type, or are we looking for more of a heavy vehicle?
No, I think as we're scaling into it, and obviously we're just having at the initial stages of what the EMS response would look like. I think we've talked about that as kind of being a step one, as we're onboarding to see the capacity, and you've seen from Brad's presentation, I'm sure you'll see from the others, that the medicals make up a large share of our calls for service. I think that's where we can make the biggest dent, and I think initially for our if we end up going the route of the medical response duty crew, it would be targeted towards those peak times that we saw. If we identified call concurrency, and really, probably I would envision a rig outfitted similar to, as Brad described, a light duty, either a Suburban, a 3/4 ton Suburban, or a pickup. But we would get we'd dial that in a little bit further once we saw exactly what types we identified which calls they'd be responding to and which times.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both for your presentation.
Thank you.
So just to
I got
close,
a question.
just to give you a little heads up on the fire department for Rogers, we have 3 full-time people, like it's myself, my deputy fire marshal, and my administrative assistant / firefighter. We are authorized to have 41 paid on call. We're at 39 right now. We have not been at 41 for about 5-6 years. It's just getting harder and harder for the paid on call. We did take delivery of a new engine here 2 weeks ago that we're working on to get in service and get it into our fleet. We've also purchased some land for our new Station 2, north on 141st, up next to the Rogers High School on the west side of 101. And we just went out for RFP for architectural services to get the bid documents going here, and hopefully start doing something next year, as long as we get council approval here in the next couple weeks.
Awesome. John had.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. Thanks, guys, for coming out. Really appreciate it. One question or a comment. You guys have played a significant part into our plan, our fire plan. So tonight would be a good opportunity to speak to that if you have thoughts about it, or things that you think should be in a different order, or as time has gone by, you thought, oh man, we should do this. It's a good opportunity for us to talk about that. And 2, a question for you, but it's actually for Dave and Jeff and Nate too. There are some costs involved, like as we've dealt with the police department here, such as mental health and then physical health of fire, something that kind of went left unaddressed for a long time. If you could speak to that, I think it's important. And then also, if you have thoughts on things that we need to think about as council for fire, and maybe even, we've got what do we work on, a 20-year plan? If there are thoughts on funding and what might happen and the things we need to think about as, if as a council, you guys should really think about this, those things are helpful too, because it's important to know what you did, but it's also we have the opportunity too to hear about like what's maybe in the 2 or 4 or even 10-year thoughts about what we as a council need to think about as far as fire coverage and costs and things we need,
So I think two of your
special
questions are kind of in the
considerations.
same category on the fire study that Corcoran did, and then we had met for almost a year. And like the police chief said, we're getting back together, believe it's next Thursday, to open the books again. Because of COVID and getting together, we kind of haven't really been meeting on that. But we want to dig back into it, and I think for tonight, I don't have any clear answers for you, but I think the group is going to be bringing some options, proposals, and seeing where the city of Corcoran, from the study, to see where we're at on the tiers that were broken out in that study, on where you want to be. Not saying it has to follow exactly if you want to jump from tier 4 to tier 8, but, you know, those are things that we got to get back on track and start discussing. On the MIN fire stuff and the cancer awareness and the emotional, things have changed a lot. It's sad that a lot of the firefighters now that are retiring are getting cancer because of all the stuff that we've taken in all these years. I've been in the fire service 38 years. When I got in the fire service, the blacker your helmet was, you were the hero. Those days are gone. We've got special wash machines. We were in Otsego on a house fire the other night. Like, 2 of my guys got just sprayed with motor oil. We had to decon their turnout gear. They couldn't even jump in the truck. We had to strip them down. They had to get in the truck with their street clothes on. We didn't even want to, contaminate the trucks. So MIN Fire, that's a state of Minnesota initiative, is to keep you clean, keep you going, emotionally, keep you healthy, and you can retire and live a long, healthy life. So we're changing a lot of things. In our new fire station that we're working on right now, we've built in clean areas and contaminated areas. So there's going to be areas in that station that you cannot go if you come back from a car fire or a house fire and you're contaminated from anything before you're cleaned. So we're adding more stuff to that. And it's a change in the fire service. So, I mean, we're trained to go into the fire. We're trained to get in there and do our job. But the education that's coming back to us is you gotta start taking care of yourself and not let that turnout gear sit in your locker for 3 weeks before you wash it. It needs to be clean right now. And we're starting to do that. We're even looking at, is it time to start looking at different, adding more turnout gear.
Mike, that was impressive.
Extra turnout gear. I did play football. I was a receiver. Yeah, and this is it's a whole new world with MIN Fire. If you saw one of our charts, we actually had a paramedic, he's a flight paramedic, also come out and talk about stress in the public safety. Was a great thing. They've been doing lots of studies from service people, from Army, Navy, down to fire, to police, to EMS, and it's just really changing how we do. We also do on the bad ones, we do breakout sessions. We bring in special people to come in and talk with our firefighters. We had a bad one here a month ago, and the police and fire that were on that scene were able to go and talk to this advisor and really help them to get things off their chest on what they saw and what the actions they took. So, John, I hope that answered all your questions.
Yeah. There's a little more flavor to firefighting than maybe we're accustomed to over the last 10 years.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Matt, if you want to add to that, what we're starting up next Thursday, I mean, we haven't been together for almost 2 years now because of COVID, and that kind of put things on the shelf. I'm working with the city of Otsego right now. They went through the same study that Corcoran went through. They're looking at all the different options and everything that they want to do for level of service, response times. Are they looking at their own fire department someday? Are they looking at a fire district? It's been kind of an interesting role with working with both communities from 2 different consultants.
Yeah, and to touch on that, so we had our working group that had, that you were on, John, as well, and we kind of developed that direction. We took that, there was a little over a year off from COVID, and then you'll remember last year we had our fire service work plan, which really gleaned out the action steps from both the study and the working group that we had, and then we're at the part kind of the, there are things happening. They reviewed the work plan and kind of gave feedback as we rolled that out to you, and right now we're actually getting into the executables in accordance with that plan. So I think you're gonna start seeing some more coming up here, I'd say in about a month with the deliveries of phase 1 and where those landed. And, Brad touched on it a little bit, but these last few years of, in public safety overall have been incredibly trying, and to see the way our fire department stepped up in roles that, fire departments in other communities even didn't. I think the way our 3 fire departments responded to COVID, they didn't miss a beat, and we're talking about, a lot of them are staffed by volunteers. They were there every step of the way. They were great to work with. Couldn't have asked for anything more, and, we had our firefighters were out in our community when there was civil unrest happening, and we were taxed, even at the police level beyond what we could handle. We had, public safety was in the community, even the fire trucks and the firefighters were in there, and that's, I would commend their actions. They went over and above and delivered every ounce of what we could ask for from those teams for the last couple of years. So I can't compliment them enough, and then on top of that, still being present at the community events and the Night to Unite and the way they engage with our community. So they're doing a great job, and I'll echo, I think we talk about this as we're planning to grow. I mean, I think our city gets tremendous value, and I think our goal is to make sure that we keep that a healthy, productive relationship between our city and their departments, that we don't overtax them and we continue to get the great service we know that they all provide for us.
Thank you. Dave, or anyone that wants to talk about Minfire at all, or you want to wait till you guys come up with anything to add what John's question was?
Oh, well, you pretty much covered it, but Hanover went above and beyond. Rockford came to us and sponsored us for these coins. They're a
I want to hand it
suicide
to him.
prevention, because suicide is a big thing in public safety between police, fire, you name it. I mean, we see a lot, and it's hard to mentally prepare all that. So when Rockford sponsored us with this coin you can carry around, which is a phone number to reach out to somebody if you have mental health issues, 24 hours a day. We thought it's a great idea, so we sponsored Rogers Fire, we sponsored Corcoran PD, and then we also sponsored St. Michael Fire and Lancaster Fire, which is way up north. We have a female in our department who is from there. So we tried to branch it out and get it through the state of Minnesota by sponsoring them. It's a great deal. And I think Rockford sponsored the Redo, right? Yeah, so it's a great deal. It's just one of those things that we're trying to combine and bond. And to answer your question about everything we deal with in the fire service and police service and EMS. You know, I hope that. Anything else on Minfire?
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right, who's stolen it?
Very cool.
I do carry this just about every day.
That'll be worth more than the US dollar in not a short amount of
The end
time.
of the meeting.
It's right there with Bitcoin. Pretty cool.
Hey,
We're ready.
You guys wanna go next?
Am I up next?
That works.
I am not as long-winded as Brad, but good evening. Thank you for allowing Hanover to provide the service we do for your community and your residents. Thank you. Brief, quick report, just our community involvement on what we do. I'm not going to read it verbatim to you, but we are out there, we do a lot of things. Fire prevention, we're very active in Hanover Elementary and Salem Lutheran School. We do a program up there every year. Let's get to the nitty-gritty, and you can go on with your day. Call history, as you can see, like Brad said, there is a huge uptick. By city, last year we had 35 calls for you guys. And if you look at the next page, I think, no, that's just day of the week. Tuesday was our busiest day, if anybody's interested. But for Corcoran, if we go to that graph page, who's ever following along? If we go to that, we've had 5 fires. If we take the engine out, the big truck, that's considered a fire. So we've had 5 of those, 2 accidents, 15 medicals, 12 fire alarms, 1 CO alarm, 4 canceled calls for a total of 30 deaths.
Just out of curiosity.
Training, even through COVID, we ended up with 220 hours in medical training. Fire training was 846.75. And the Wright County SRU is the Wright County team that's put together for special rescue unit for special responses, grain bins, confined space, hazardous materials, that sort of thing. And then mentoring new members, we had 52 hours. We were fortunate enough over the last year and a half to pick up 9 new people, which is fantastic in this time. So we send them through a mentoring program we have, and then they go through Fire 1, Fire 2, and EMR, and then they come off probation and everything else. The yearly recap, provided mutual aid 15 times, received it 1 time. And there it just goes into time and everything else. And then our total runs for the year is the last page of the yearly recap. We had 183 total calls. Is that right? No, 229 total. 183 last year. So as you can see, there's a big uptick, and like Brad was saying, medical is number 1. You know, that's what we're going on most of the time for, is medical calls. We're getting an older population, they need our help more. Questions?
Just out of curiosity, not a very deep one, but any idea why your Tuesdays are the busiest day?
No idea.
It seemed
No
like an
idea.
odd.
The year before, it was like Mondays, so
Gotcha.
every year it's just different.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Questions?
Any other questions? Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do. Fleur.
You're next.
Hi, thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me tonight. I'm Jeff Lure, I'm the fire chief in Loretto. I just want to give you a little quick synopsis of our department. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. So we contract with 5 different cities. We're a separate organization from a city. So just wanted to state that we've been in business for 74 years. This is our full report. I'm going to scale it down quite a bit if you just want to click through this. And I believe, did you pass out some short?
Yes, would you,
So
I
we're just
have that
gonna-
as well. Which would you prefer up on this?
Okay, all right. So we're just focusing, that's where our membership is. Next slide. We have 11 in Corcoran. That's just a breakdown of our calls throughout our city. 59 last year in Corcoran is what we had. We had a record number last year of 299 calls. Next slide. That's just a pie chart of our incidents and where they are, and I believe, I forgot my glass at home, but Corcoran is about.
We're the green one, it looks
Green
like.
one,
Yeah.
20%, sorry. Next slide. That's just calls of service types, 18 medicals, and this is just in Corcoran. Fires, 8, 17 alarms. PI accidents, those are accidents that involve injuries. Gas odors, and 4 good intent. Good intent might be anything. Somebody might just call up, see somebody taking a nap on the front yard, saying there's one down. We go there and the guy's sleeping, guy or gal is sleeping, so they're just kind of good intent calls, so. Next slide. That's our overall in our whole fire district. See quite a few of our calls are during the day. The daytime is when a lot of people are at work. So we have an average of about 13 people, 12 people that are able to show up during the day. So our call turnout is actually fairly decent, so. Days of the week, Tuesday. I don't know why Tuesday, people will go to work and then they're depressed and something happens on Tuesday, but Tuesday's the day, I guess. I don't know what it is, but that's the day we had our most calls last year, so. Response times, these are just the response times from, that we respond based on, like in under 5 minutes, 6 to 10 minutes. We're usually on the scene with 1 hour, and these are response times, not for our duty vehicles, but for our actual fire trucks, or the people that are in there to be able to do stuff. Between 6 and 10 minutes is our largest number, and then 10 minutes or more. And then the green is a canceled en route, so. We had 20, oh, keep going. No, keep going, next slide. Mutual aid, we're called a lot for mutual aid. Last time we went out, last year we went out 47 times for mutual aid to different departments. I don't know, for some reason they call us, I don't know if that's good or bad. And we received mutual aid 9 times in our fire district from departments within our area, so. That's just an apparatus response. You can see our utility 11, that's the medical truck. That truck went out the most last year. So like we were talking earlier, we have a smaller truck that goes 2-3 people in it or whatever to our medical calls, so.
Was that the truck on the previous pictures on the slide? Go back one more. That
Yes,
one.
that's that truck right there.
Okay.
And we do have an extrication tool on there. We have a lot of medical supplies on there. We carry a lot of extra stuff on that thing, so it's kind of a quick response vehicle. Next slide. We have the Hennepin County Fire Investigation Trailer that we take out to different cities, stationed in Loretto. And what we do is, when the fire investigation team is called out to a fire, and you can see the cities that we were called out to last year, we take the trailer, 2 people in a trailer, and we take it to that city, and then in that trailer is digging tools and all kinds of supplies and stuff to be able to dig through and sift through fires that we're called to. So we cover the whole Hennepin County, and those are the calls that we went out on last year with that trailer, so. This is just total fire calls, our fire administrative hours, training, our public events and maintenance, our firefighter overalls. We did about 45, a little over 4,600 calls almost. Our total hours is about 10,000 hours for our firefighters. And we have 34 firefighters currently on our department. Slide. That's our budget. Pretty simple. Operational capital, about a $600,000 budget. Next slide. The only thing I want to point on this is that's a city contract, so that's divided amongst the 5 cities, is donations and grants. But donations, we do very well. Because we're a 501c, we have a lot of people come forward with money. We're tax deductible, that kind of stuff. I just want to give a quick, we had a Corcoran resident last spring he came into my office and said, I'm getting up there in age, I want to know something that will save my life. And he said, I've heard about these Lucas machines. So he, I don't know if you've know of their automatic, they do the automatic CPR for you, they're battery operated. And he said, how many do you have? And I said, 1. He goes, is that busy? And I said, well, not really. But he said, if that gets busy, what's going to happen to me if I go down? I said, well, then we have to call somebody up. Anyways, he said, how much would one of them cost? I said, $16,000. He said, can I donate to it? I said, sure. He said, I'll be back next week. He came back next week and wrote a check out for $16,000 to buy another. So that Corcoran resident donated $16,000 to our organizations, just so we have an extra Lucas on one of our other trucks. So we have gambling. We have gambling in the Choo Choo Bar, pull tabs and that kind of stuff. Our phase is we love losers. More people lose, the more money we make. So you see it on our gambling. We have a gambling booth. We love losers. So that's how we eat quite a bit of our donations. So next slide. Just some things. We purchased a new dryers. Had to get some new overhead doors. We got some gear lockers. There's that Lucas device that I talked about that we purchased. And thanks to the Northwest JCs, they gave us $9,000 to purchase 3 extra thermal imagers. Wow. Next slide. Kind of highlights. So Blue Card is a nationally known certified incident command system. We had 9 people go through that, so we have 9 people. Actually, we have 13 now because we had 4 do it at the beginning of the year that are certified in nationally an incident command instructor. So if it's a big incident, we have people certified. We did some fire apparatus course with Rogers, actually, up in the city of Rogers. Several parades. I think one highlight that we really enjoyed was the Ravina neighborhood. They had food trucks every couple weeks, and we have sign-ups for people to go to them. And so we would send a truck and 2 or 4 firefighters, and they just enjoyed going over there in the Ravina neighborhood with the food trucks. The people came out, and that was a highlight of Corcoran for us. They really enjoyed going out to that. And in fact, we talked about it last night, and the question was asked, is that going to happen again this year?
I have an answer.
Yeah.
They can't get the food trucks to commit
Okay.
because
all
they
right.
can go to other places. So it
Sounds like everyone opened back up again, and now they're booked like crazy. But if they can find some, or I can help find some, or anyone can, I'm sure they'd.
Can't you guys cook? and.
Nope. Nope.
We can always find another neighborhood.
Just not
There
at
you go.
scale.
Oh, okay.
Okay, next slide.
Okay.
This one's a tough one. I might have a hard time. We lost a firefighter last year, 41-year-old Aaron Bynum. We got called to his house at 3:30 on December 11th for a person down. My son lives in my house. He heard the address. He said, "That's Aaron, one down, not breathing." We were called to it. We were the first ones on the scene. We responded in the house. Aaron had passed. He had been gone quite a while. He was a huge member on our department. He worked at the hospital down in Abbott Northwestern, yeah, Abbott, I guess, sorry about that. And just a huge, and you talk about on that day was tragic for fire. That's our first due to death in our department in 74 years. Anyways, so we worked through it. It affected our department. We were pretty messed up. And we got through it. Like Brad said, we had Min Fire come out, did a lot of counseling with these people, got through it, and we had a huge turnout. We had a huge funeral down in Plymouth for Aaron. There were actually, there's a memorial service at the state fire department conference next Saturday. Aaron, his wife, his 3 kids, and his mother-in-law are going with 4 of us out to that memorial service. So it was hard on our department. It beat us up. And I'm going to say it. When their 12-year-old son comes out to you and says, "Can you save my dad?" Because his dad found him. It kicks your butt. And I said, it's going to be tough. I mean, but whatever works, it's going to work out. So, sorry, it still affects me. But our department is working through it. And as Brad said, there's Min Fire. After the first year, we took a further step into PAR 360. PAR 360 goes a little bit next step for mental health and cancer and that, but mainly mental health. So what we did is we took that, we went to PAR 360, and what that does is that offers officers counseling and stuff for not only the firefighters, but the firefighters' spouses and their wives. So we took that on. We just feel it's more important to get our people. We're coming back. I mean, we're back to pretty much normal, but when it comes up, it kind of still affects me, so. Of course. Next slide. And that's it. Thank you very much for having me. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for the chief?
I didn't sound that, come on.
Yeah, I'll ask. The status, did I hear something with Medina and Loretto? Is there an integration or anything going on there?
I did touch on that, yeah. So we are in the process of looking into consolidation right now with the Hamel Fire Department.
Hamel, okay.
And there's also some, and Mayor McKee goes to those meetings, and there's also a larger group that is looking. Us and Hamel are right now in the process of working through, trying to see if we're able to consolidate.
Okay.
That's where we're at. There's another study going on with us in Maple Plain right now. They're looking at having a taxing district in Maple Plain, Independence. So that's going on right now, so I'm kind of being pulled that way too. But yeah, for the most part, that's what we're doing, is we're working through that. We feel it'd be the best for, Medina and Corcoran and all the cities that we serve if we can get together, save on stuff and that, equipment, that kind of stuff. So, one thing I've got to touch out is our pension. Our pension is fully vested at 170%. We're gonna have a fairly large, we're gonna have an increase next month. But we're just we wanted, as long as everything was going good, we have a decent pension now. We wanted to see what was gonna happen to the economy, and hopefully it keeps going, but we never know, so. That's all I got.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you
for
so
having me.
much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for all of you guys do, and all the departments do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. I'll go on to consent agenda, which consists of items 7A through 7H. Does anyone want to pull anything?
Mayor, could I just make a note that we
Yeah.
did have one additional claim in front of you on your dais? Just wanted to note that before we approve the consent agenda, it's for the Watershed Commission. It was a $5,400 expense. So just a quick note.
Sounds good.
We want to pull 7H?
Yep.
Yeah,
what I
I
was
second that one.
Anything else? Okay, I will enter,
If I could just pull G quick.
yeah,
Not a lot to talk about, just want to ask a question.
sounds good. Anything else again? I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through F.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Go to 7G first. And Dean, did you have some questions?
On the remodel and such, how many more pay requests are there? And have we paid our audio video data? And I'm speaking to last week's meeting, we didn't have camera and stuff, are we up to date on?
That's a great
On the
question.
data, camera and everything? I mean,
That's a great question.
I make light of it, but just asking.
We did have a piece of equipment failed. So we have had that replaced, so our camera system is working. But we do believe that we're finalizing, we're hoping to finalize and close out the project. We don't anticipate any other further change orders, so I think we're just at the next pieces to close out the project, and we're working on.
Almost
on
done.
that.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Has anybody heard of another government project that finished only 2% above initial estimate?
Not the light rail in.
Congratulations to staff for managing that well.
Can I ask what this pay order, what this is for? Because it wasn't very clear from the backup.
Sure, so this change order was, we approved in January. There was we needed to add a cooling component to the server room.
Okay.
Due to the HVAC. The server room was warm and making other parts of the building cold. So we just needed to make an HVAC adjustment to make sure that
Okay.
we weren't freezing out some offices while trying to cool the servers.
Yeah, I remember you bringing that up before. It just wasn't clear from the backup, so thank you.
Appreciate that.
Anything else on G? I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 7G.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Then we'll go to 7H, which is a resolution accepting a donation from the J.C.'s. And we'll go ahead and read that, as we normally do. So whereas the city of Corcoran supports the efforts of the Northwest Area J.C.'s, and whereas the Northwest Area J.C.'s has made a financial donation to the city of Corcoran in the amount of $1,065 for the Parks and Trails Commission tree giveaway, whereas the city council finds that it is appropriate to accept the donations as offered for the benefit of the Parks and Trails Commission tree giveaway, the city of Corcoran, and residents. Now therefore be it resolved that the city council of the city of Corcoran acknowledges the generosity of the Northwest Area J.C.'s and graciously accepts the donations. And thank you to the J.C.'s.
How many trees have they given away?
It's a good
I-
question.
That is a great
It's
question.
thousands and
Any idea?
thousands. I think last year we got the number, it was like,
I don't have it off the top of my head. I believe Jessica said it was in the 600, usually it's about 600 trees per year.
yeah.
And we've been doing it for many, many
Yeah.
years.
So it's the
Thousands would probably be.
It's a J.C.'s and the Corcoran Garden Club, and it's like Tom Anderson's baby. So Tom's, I'm sure, watching and hanging on every word we say. So thank you, Tom, for all the work you've done in that.
Anything else on that one? I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 7H.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will go on to planning business. We do have a public comment opportunity for 8, I guess, A and B that we kind of made on the fly here. We'll do that first, and then we'll go into Counselor Nichols' 8A.
Anyone wishing to speak in the audience can come to the podium, state your name and address. I didn't receive any public comment cards prior to, but we certainly can allow for that. And then anyone joining us online, we'll go ahead and do the public comment in the chambers first, but if you are interested, press *9 or click raise your hand. And we do have a 5-minute timeline generally for our remarks, so just as everyone is aware.
With option to extend.
With an option to extend certainly as council.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Tim Sullivan, President and CEO of Wright-Hennepin Cooperative Electric Association. It's good to be with you tonight. I thought you'd want to see the face behind the name of the person who's been sending you so much correspondence recently. Tonight, as this council well knows, you have the application for the Corcoran 2 substation before you. Now, that application enjoys the support of the city staff of Wright-Hennepin, and it embeds this most recent example in front of you tonight, embeds the recommendations made last week by the Corcoran Planning Commission. And because of that, we recommend it to your attention for your strong support. Now, let me share with you just a few of the things that changed since the last time you saw it. The first is that the commission considered and did not accept the recommendation on a wall, and that is because the City of Corcoran's code, as this council well knows, has a strong preference for landscaping, And the current plan in front of you far exceeds standard city code. In your code, you have a requirement that a tree in a situation like this needs to be placed every 50 feet. 50. This will be every 19 feet. Minimum requirement for this substation would be 30 trees. There are 76 trees. In addition, with the Planning Commission's efforts last week, they will be double spaced. You will have a 4-foot berm on the north and west side. So bear in mind, you will have a 4-foot berm and then trees anywhere, depending on how they are put in, between 4 and 10 feet. So your barrier will be 8 to 14 feet. In addition, there was concern expressed at this council meeting around sound abatement and safety issues. This substation meets all local and state sound ordinances, as well as state and federal safety ordinances. But most importantly, this substation will deliver safe, reliable power to the city of Corcoran and its residents for many decades to come. And it is the key element to power the growth and expansion plans already approved by this council. Now, I hope we can agree that this meeting should be conducted on the basis of facts and evidence and the record and the city code. And similarly, I hope we can agree that non-germane issues or questions that are raised that are unsubstantiated don't have a place here tonight. Now, the common thing that binds us together is this council has the high and solemn obligation to look out for the long-term best interests of City of Corcoran residents. Similarly, Wright-Hennepin, a member-owned electric cooperative, has the responsibility, the obligation to look out for the long-term best interests of our membership, which includes those same residents. So for all these reasons, we think approving the Corcoran 2 substation merits your support and approval. Should you have any questions, we invite and welcome those. We not only stand ready, we welcome those questions. And we think you will find the answers strong and compelling. Finally, I'll leave you with this thought. Electricity is the cornerstone of modern American life. It is an essential service, critical to facilitating the growth and expansion plans of this city. We are about to be on the cusp of hundreds of new residents coming into this community, and every one of them needs safe, reliable power. But it's not just providing that important power. It's providing them a quality of life that allows them to pursue their hopes and their dreams and their aspirations. That's what's at stake in front of this council tonight. So we would ask for your support. We would ask for your approval. We think it merits and deserves both. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name's Mark Lanterman. I live at 6936 Oak Ridge Road in Corcoran, and I'm a member of the city's Planning Commission. City Council. With the court's recent order, it seems that now some of the defect that I highlighted in a previous meeting has been cured, and that title will be transferred to Right Hennepin if one of two things happen from the court order. Quote, Title II and possession of owner's real property rights described in the petition and attached as Exhibit A shall vest in petitioner on April 26th in the future, or the date on which petitioner deposits with the Hennepin County District Court administrator or pays to the owner the amount of $489,230.77, whichever date is later, end quote. Because the later of the two dates has not yet occurred, and because I am told by Ms. Sween's attorney that payment has not yet been made, I still think that this application is not properly before council tonight. Regardless, I will also mention that our city code specifically states that the city, quotes, prefers natural screening. Why are we expecting Right Hennepin to deviate from this and build a concrete wall? It seems unfair to any applicant, this one or any future applicant, who plans a project and relies on city code during its development only to be told at the last minute, we want something else. We seem to be in the habit of applying our personal wishes and whims. If we don't like the code, change it. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
There's no one joining us virtually who's commenting.
Okay. Perfect. Then we will go into 8A, and Jeremy, if you want to lead that discussion.
So I asked staff to put together a couple slides for us to discuss the potential for re-looking at the zoning surrounding where the substation will go. I raised the point the last time council discussed this. When you have a significant new development go into an area that has the potential to affect the suitability of surrounding zoning, we should take a few minutes and just discuss whether we want to look at any modifications. If you recall, I think the key example that I've heard before is when Bellwether was approved and that land was converted from industrial to residential. We didn't take a good look at the surrounding area and didn't build in appropriate buffers. So I just want to try to avoid that mistake. I don't expect us to make a decision at this point. I just want to have a discussion whether we think it's appropriate and what other zones might be worth considering, and then we can ask staff to give us a recommendation at a future date. But the parcel of interest is, I believe, this one. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is mixed residential currently. To the north, we have the DMU district, downtown mixed use. To the west, we've got industrial. To the south, we have urban reserve that is also guided for medium-density residential. And then to the east, we have more medium-density residential. To me, it seemed worth considering some of the surrounding zoning types as appropriate for this site when the substation is in place. My primary concern is it is kind of an industrial look to that kind of a facility. If it was a home development that abuts it, that's kind of there's an inelegant transition area there. Perhaps extending the DMU area south one parcel could be appropriate. Potentially commercial could be appropriate. I think if you put some of the uses that are permitted in those kinds of zones in this parcel adjacent to a substation, it could be an appropriate fit because you can put it, behind a commercial establishment, a retail establishment, or an office area, and it wouldn't have a negative impact on anyone. I asked staff to put together a second slide that would show what those zones would allow.
Oh, yes, I do have that. Give me one moment here. Pull that up. It's a pretty comprehensive list for the zones. So we have a table that outlines the different allowable uses within. It didn't fit well onto a slide, so I
understand.
apologize for that, but I thought we could scroll down. So there are a variety of uses, particularly in the downtown DMU. So it's very comprehensive. There are about 54 different total uses, and several of them, as you can see, there are many uses for the DMU.
So with that, I'll open up the floor for discussion.
Could you make that bigger?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Give me just
What are you guys, old?
Yeah.
I'm getting there.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, my sentiments exactly when Jeremy suggested that in the last meeting. I think it is something we absolutely have to visit related to the substation going in this, on this corner and such. It's only right
What's it?
to rezone
Rezone?
if it fits into our vision, if that makes sense.
So what are you hoping to rezone it to? I know you just said that, but
I feel it makes sense to not introduce an entirely new zone to that area. So, to me, the most logical thing to do would be to extend the downtown mixed-use area to the south. Because currently, the comprehensive plan calls for the DMU to directly abut mixed residential. It still would if we extend it to this parcel. So you're not drastically modifying what kinds of establishments are permissible, you're just changing where that boundary is going to be. And I feel like there's a number of things that could be done within the DMU district permitted list that could be compatible with this kind of a site.
Do we normally do this with a comprehensive amendment change?
You would absolutely have to do a comprehensive plan amendment.
So would we would normally do that, unless there's a petition, we would normally do that when we do our next comprehensive plan change, update, right?
Necessarily, we've done some minor changes.
Yeah, I mean, the city council can always choose to amend the comprehensive plan as a council. An applicant could come in and ask for that. Generally, when we make land use changes between comprehensive plan updates, it tends to be driven by landowners. But it is possible for either a city or a landowner to request or propose an amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a case where we would change a land use outside of a comprehensive plan update without an applicant requesting a change.
I can't think of one, but there may have been. It's certainly possible.
I would think we would probably want to meet with the applicant.
Oh, absolutely.
Property owner several times before anything was really
Yeah.
seriously considered.
And I only bring this up now in this way so that we don't have that conversation with them if the council wouldn't support a change.
Gotcha.
But yeah, they should be involved, just like we would when we go through the normal comprehensive plan update process. There's a huge amount of public engagement that goes along with that. This will be more limited because it's a smaller scope of change, but certainly that process should be followed.
If I could ask one more question. Jessica, could you just back up to the map?
Sure. One second here.
My assumption, our comprehensive plan that was originally zoned, or the parcel we're talking about was originally zoned mixed use, and that would support that downtown type
Yeah.
deal?
In
Okay.
in the comprehensive plan, the land use is mixed residential. However, the zoning is also.
Urban reserve.
Urban reserve.
The green is urban reserve.
No, it's
We're not in urban reserve.
It's
No.
mixed residential as well. So it's currently.
So,
mixed
yeah, sorry.
residential.
But
Yep.
But if you go back one slide now,
Yep,
that parcel to the south of Larkin is mixed use on that one?
it's mixed residential.
Mixed residential.
Yeah, on both. So there would be a comprehensive plan piece. I would note that this parcel is also in our Southeast District Design area, so as it is currently proposed. So we may need to look at amendments to that ordinance as well.
I think one positive of this, rather than the other one, is there will be a known entity for the people around it, rather than trying to force something into an area that already has development around it, I think would be a mistake. And smoothing the transition, I think we've all been okay with changing land use maps, depending on what's in front of us, I think. So it's a good point that we should be aware of, and we should be flexible on that. Now, are you asking to codify that flexibility and a change in the land use, or are you just saying it aloud so we think about it?
The outcome that I would like is for us to decide if we want to have discussions with staff on a specific idea and bring the appropriate landowners into the loop and get their input.
I think any land use change should be driven by the landowner. So if they want us to change it, I think they should come to us versus us starting with staff and then going to them. I'm open to changing it, but I want them to come to us and say, I want this changed. I don't want to use, mixed residential. I'd rather have downtown. If they want to come to us and start that discussion, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and I'd say if that does happen, then I think the question now is, are we open to that, at least looking into it early on, and I'd say yes. I think everyone is
Yeah.
open to it.
Yeah, it's not a radical zone change.
Right.
So maybe we could just reach out to the landowner and say, by the way, we're welcome to,
Invite that conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can talk to him Monday.
Okay.
Sounds good. We'll go on to 8B, the original 8A, which is the preliminary plat site plan administrative permit for Corcoran 2 substation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would note on the dais is one additional email that was received by council.
I'll be brief. I know you're very familiar with the project. This is the Right Hennepin application for preliminary plat, site plan, and administrative permit. Next slide. We just looked at the property, so next slide. The council looked at this on March 24th and directed it back to the Planning Commission. They did look at it at the 7th of April last week to recommend screening. Next slide. And the staff report outlines these 5 conditions as recommended by the Planning Commission. That is in your staff report. It is in the draft resolution.
Can I make a motion before you continue?
Ken, I had some slides I was going to share about what it will look like.
Yep,
These
I want to interrupt and make a motion, we table it until actual ownership is transferred. To me, this is no different than me bringing something forward to the council on Dean's property, and the applicant doesn't own the property. And I find it to be an issue for me to look at an application on somebody else's property. So I wish to table it until ownership is established.
Okay, so we have the motion. Do we have a second for that?
Can I ask a question? What makes this different than a PUD where somebody comes in and wants to give us a sketch plan and
I think the
a
difference is
preliminary and
there's
they
a
don't-
willing buyer and a seller in that in that process, there's an unwilling seller in this situation.
Yeah, but I think the sale is basically done by the court.
It's not done.
When do we think that aspect would, that, 'cause
That would be a question for the applicant of when those funds would be available, but the two stipulations are no later than the April 26th date or the transfer of funds as outlined in the stipulation. So if you'd be
that'd be
willing.
great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, technically, Wright Hennepin cannot take title according to the law before April 26th. Wright Hennepin has every intention of doing so. Further, the resolution before you is conditioned upon Wright Hennepin taking title to the property. So final plat approval will not occur until Wright Hennepin actually takes title to the property. So there's no intent to delay this by Wright Hennepin. They fully intend to deposit the funds with the court in a timely manner, and they will take title as soon as April 26th.
But they don't have title right now.
They have a signed.
We don't do
order of-
contingent, I wouldn't do a contingent proposal if I wanted to buy and make a proposal for Dean's land.
Well, I would say generally, we don't do a contingent, we don't outline title in resolutions. However, there are can be purchase agreements on properties. Kendra may be able to speak to that a bit more.
That's willing buyer and willing seller. Well, I guess I stand by what I say. I don't want to take a application on somebody who doesn't own the property. Unless there's an agreement between the buyer and seller, which we don't have.
So there is a motion, is there a second?
Well, we really needed a second for a discussion. I'll make a second for discussion's sake.
Thank you.
So can I ask staff, are we within a window of review?
May 31st, I believe.
Yeah, May 31st is the 120-day review deadline.
A motion to table is generally not debatable?
Yeah.
So just a note on that.
Gotcha.
Mr. Mayor, if I could get you guys, we are in a long discussion. If you could stop, it's distracting for us. Thank you.
What do you mean by a motion to table is not
Well, we're not
debatable?
really strict on Robert's rules. Generally, I think we generally, once there's a motion to table, that ends discussion. You vote and that's it.
Oh,
Unfortunately.
you don't even need a second?
You get your motion, your second, and you vote, period, and move
If we
on.
were
But I think
strictly
the
Robert.
mayor has certainly the flexibility to allow something different.
Yeah, I think let's discuss it a bit. So your motion would be to table it to when?
So they have actual ownership of the property.
Which would
Public
like,
meeting on the 28th?
The next meeting that we do have scheduled would be April 28th.
We don't have a full council that day, do we?
no,
Do we need a
Correct.
full council?
don't believe so.
There's not a 4/5 requirement for this approval.
From my perspective, I'm comfortable with the conditions in the resolution. I don't have John's reservation.
I think we're basing it on a technicality, really. I mean, the court is not going to go back on their order. So it's just a motion of depositing funds. They could have deposited the funds this morning if they wanted to,
But they didn't.
but they didn't.
I would imagine they're probably
Ownership is a
waiting for it to be
pretty
approved.
important thing. We can vote against me. I'll take a
That's a
4-1. We can go through the discussion.
All right, we want to have a vote on that? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Abstained? I think,
Alan,
I need a minute
I
to,
voted aye. It's not going to change my ultimate vote on this thing, but
Right.
if you want to base it on a technicality, I can give it 2 more weeks. I'm sure it's not going to kill this project.
so just to be clear, we have Bottom Schultz, aye.
Aye.
Nichols, and
I'd like you to add Van Camp to the aye.
Aye.
I've been very clear from the start that it is just something that I have problems with.
Yes, sir.
The way this has gone from the start, and I would rather clear ownership be there.
Makes sense.
As Councilmember Bottom has brought up. So
So then that does pass 3-2.
Yep, and it is tabled until
The
April
April
28th.
28th meeting, yes. Thank you. Just a minute here.
Everybody better come with a purchase agreement in hand. Everybody better have ownership in hand going forward.
Okay, we'll go on to unfinished business. We do have another public comment opportunity on 9A through G. Give everyone a minute here to.
Thank you. Anyone joining us in the audience would like to make a comment, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and click raise your hand. Mayor, at this time, no one's raising their hand for business.
Okay, then we'll go into 9A, which is water supply planning, financial analysis.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have Tammy Omdahl with North End Securities here, who has helped us do a review of our finances related to our water plan, and then Kevin Mattson and I have been working closely with Tammy to talk through and come up with our assumptions for this. So I'll have Tammy go ahead and present. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Tammy Umdahl with Northland Security, serving as advisor to the city. As I go through this, there's, I don't know, about 10 or 15 slides. As Jessica mentioned, we were asked to look at specifically the water fund long-term financial plan with respect to the city council's consideration of potential treatment and storage improvement projects that you've been considering. I would note that typically when I'm before you on the long-term financial plan, it's comprehensive of all the city funds in a longer presentation. This focuses just on the water fund. If you can go on to the next slide. So again, and you can move past that, Jessica, thank you. So the study approach, it's really modeling the impact of that future development and driving that need for that treatment and the storage. We looked at projecting both operating expenses and revenue, along with both those capital improvement projects, the estimated cost as prepared by engineering, and the timing related to it. You can go on to the next one. With respect to, let's just get to the conclusion. Given the assumptions to date that it's projected that the water fund would have sufficient cash to meet all of its obligations, both operating, pay-go capital, because there's beyond just debt issuance, and debt obligations, future debt obligations. This assumes that the council were to continue to adopt your annual rating adjustments as you have been doing for at least an approximate decade, and the adoption of development charges at a level that would pay for those future improvements, while the city maintains one enterprise fund for water system operations. You collect different fees and charges. You collect fees and charges for the cost of providing the water to the users, and you collect development charges with respect to the build-out of the system, including treatment and storage. If you can go on to the next slide. Here is the look at, and TLAC stands for the trunk charges, calculated by engineering based upon estimated future cost of those capital improvement projects related solely to development, and the build out as far as the area. So on the table at the bottom there, for 20, 21, 22, and 23, you can see both the historical through 22 as adopted and 22 would require a change, and then 23 going forward. Engineering has looked at the concept after discussion with Northland and with staff of breaking out the development charges related to trunk between water availability charge for the land, and then a separate line item for water treatment storage charge per acre of land. The reason being that sometimes as land develops and the developer builds out some of those trunks, there's some credit towards that. And the concept that a developer does not build out the treatment and the storage facilities, and therefore those fees would not be waived. So it would be a separate line item for each of them to provide flexibility for staff to continue your process when land develops in the negotiation of waiving of some of those potential fees. If you go to the next slide, Jessica, please. So the plan is based upon achieving annual ending cash balance. So we look at what do those fees need to be in order to ensure that the city has, on an annual basis, once a year when you do your financial statements, cash sufficient to cover 3 months of operating, to cover any debt obligations that exist and are coming due and payable. For following year planned PAYGO capital, the plan doesn't anticipate debt issuance for ongoing projects or annual. It's just those major projects. And then last, maintain a reserve for future improvements. So if you can go to the next slide, we're going to get into a few slides. And this demonstrates maintaining that future reserves. And I'm going to step forward, Mr. Mayor, just to show you this line is referring to projected ending cash over the next decade. The bars at the bottom represent those minimum cash needed for those purposes that I outlined, operating, debt service, and PAYGO capital. Based upon those trunk charges that were outlined for you a moment ago, the fund would build up cash because the concept is that you're asking development to pay for those improvements that are needed to support that development. So that cash in 2030 would be used to pay for additional treatment and storage that engineering is planning for. If you can go to the next slide. So background on that future development driving that, approximately 780 water customers, and that is a typo. It's at the end of 2021 that you were billing. The assumption in the plan includes approximately 1,265 acres of land to be platted between 2022 and 2031, and that would result in an estimated increase in residential equivalent customers of the utility of about 3,600 during that period of 2022 to 2031. Those customers, and as development occurs, there's development charges, but you also bring on new customers that are paying for that operating cost, that supplying of that water to those residential. Can you go to the next slide, Jessica? So here's that, on an annual basis, that projection for future acres of land platted between that period of time. And you can see that bump there in 2022. These are estimates. When I'm before you with the long-term financial plan, they are based upon certain assumptions. For example, if this development did not occur at the rate that's being forecasted, it's potential as you get out there towards the end of the next decade that you may not have enough cash to pay for that project on a cash basis and may have to introduce some debt. But right now, it's assuming that that development would occur at these levels and that you would have that cash available to pay for those improvements when they need to be made. If you can go to the next chart. So here's the projection for growth that's driving the revenue and expense estimates for the water fund and impacts on proposed water utility rates. The commercial bar on top is not missing. It's just that we're only assuming very minor growth in the commercial. That may prove to be incorrect. It won't material change it. It's really the residential units that's driving this, as the council is well aware. If you can go to the next slide, Jessica, please. So we are assuming from those new customers added, that volume will increase, so will operating revenues. That is forecasted into the plan. If you can go to the next slide. So here, bookend of the two storage and treatment projects. So potentially in 2023 that you have been working towards, as well as out in 2031. The 2023 project would require the issuance of debt to finance that improvement. The fund does not have sufficient cash, as the council may be aware. In 2031, based upon those development charges that are being proposed, and if development were to occur at that pace, at those amounts, it would be projected that the city would have cash available to pay for that improvement in 2031. If you can go to the next slide. This demonstrates that. So in 2023, while there is some consideration of some use of cash for that project in '23, the majority of it would come from the issuance of debt. I know the city is looking at potential other sources, non-city, but presently in the long-term plan, that is how it is forecasted or modeled. Then in 2031, the majority of that project would be paid for with cash if these assumptions were to hold true. If you can go to the next slide. So here, if in fact there is debt issued in '23 for that project, the debt for the water fund, given how that would be structured, would increase to about on an ongoing basis, about 1.2 million, and you see the amortization of that debt over time. Presently, that debt is looked to be structured around revenues versus level annual debt service. You are a ways away from issuing those bonds at the time that that would be reviewed and considered the best option for the city. Jessica, if you can go to the next slide. So in summary, really maintaining that focus on long-term financial planning. This is built around assumptions. It won't occur exactly as we have forecast or modeled it, but certainly there is projected to be sufficient revenue available in cash to meet all the obligations of the fund. And that assumption on those trunk charts. Tonight, there is no action for the city council to take. It was really meant to provide an update that given certain assumptions, would the water fund have sufficient cash to meet those obligations? And the answer is yes. Mr. Mayor, council, any questions for me that I can answer or revisit any of those items?
Any questions? I have a couple.
Go for it.
One is, what are the assumptions on new, I don't know if it's in here, new residents, the number of, so it's four, go back to that.
About 30, if you can go back to
What's
that.
the variability in those? Did you do stress testing and, like Monte Carlo analysis of forward-looking projections if we have a normal standard deviation in the expected equivalent uses or anything like that? Or is this just based on a static number?
This is based upon a model that staff has been using over the last number of years by development. So staff can maybe speak to some of those assumptions. So we use that as an input to
So you use
financial
stat,
model.
okay. And then, when we look at our, credit rating, so I know those staff ones, so they're just static, and that's okay. I just want to know the analysis, if this is different than what we were looking at. The ratings, the price of the water tower went up, the water tower and system went up like 42% in a year. And does that play into, I know part of the answer, but I didn't have the conversation. Does that play into some of the conversation with the rating agencies? Obviously, everything has gone up in price over the last year and a half. But that's a big, there's not a price in here that can tell us future rating, or if our rating goes down, what that might impact our interest rate and that kind of stuff. Was that part of the discussion too, about the potential cost and how much it's gone up and how it might impact our credit rating as a town?
Mayor, council member, so there was a rating call this week because you are going to be issuing bonds related to equipment. And as part of that rating call, staff has to disclose plans, discussions, not that you've taken any action on the issuance of these bonds, but the potential. So when that rating report is released here in the coming week or so, That will account for at least the current estimate for the 2023 project financing. At this point, including the analyst on the call, there were no red flags highlighted. They certainly have not affirmed or given the city's rating at this point. We'll know that soon. But I would just note that that is part of that process for the rating review, that the city needs to disclose its plans for debt issuance. So we will get a sense of that coming out of this rating report that is due out next week.
Okay, thank you. That's all I got.
Any other questions?
I have a few.
Go for it.
This is probably the best slide for this question. If development were to go to 0 acres for a period of time, say 2 years, I imagine that the goal would be to try to fund debt service out of the utility collections.
Yes.
At what point is it possible to go a year or two with no acres being platted and be able to cover that without it falling into the general fund?
So you don't need to turn there, Jessica. So given very preliminary structure for those bonds, you saw that debt service, we'll say $1 million some. Years ago, when Corcoran established your water fund, to your point, purposely combined did not do separate trunk fund, combined it and called your water enterprise fund. So yes, you could, under state law too, cash flow that for a while from your total cash balance and those operating revenues. It will depend on how much development would occur prior to that, back to that chart where I had on volume, and how much revenue is being collected. Last year, when I was asked by staff to look at this potential structure, there was some talk of potentially pushing out some of that principal to hedge the city's timing of that development with respect to not having all of that debt of that 1.2 million come. Those are discussions that you can have as you prepare for that, which isn't tonight, prepare for that issuance, but I know staff was asking to look at different scenarios of slowly increasing that debt service levy versus, that debt service payment versus having it all hit in 1 year with level annual structure. So there are some options. I think it'll depend on where you're at that point when you're ready to issue those bonds. Have we specifically looked at what those utility operating revenues would have to be if there wasn't development? We have not. That is certainly something that we could look at.
Okay. That would help me feel more comfortable.
We can certainly try to look at that. I would say, in general, we would look at adjusting our fees, and we would look at that annually. So if something were to happen, we could certainly look at making sure that we're adjusting rates, and we look at that annually to ensure that we're going to be able to cash flow, because we'd want to have as much as we always want it to come out of the utility funds and not be on the city's general fund.
I was wondering if you can go back to the slide that shows fee levels. One forward from that, I think. So I had a couple questions on this one. Sure. Northeast Corcoran, we would be going to about $30,000 an acre. I was wondering what the current fee is when people have to pay both Corcoran and Maple Grove. How close is it to what this would be?
I think it might be just under the 30,000 currently today, because we're about 17, and we made an adjustment. We're right around 17 here with the last increase. It would be somewhat, I think it's about, they do their calculations a little differently. Off the top of my head, it's about close to 12,000 that we pay Maple Grove per acre.
Okay.
So it's equitable, but keep in mind, until we have this operating, which wouldn't be until potentially the spring of '24, depending on materials, so short. I mean, it's potential to extend with some of these, intricate pieces. So keep in mind, from the period between now and then, when we're fully operational, Maple Grove would still need to authorize any new development. And then at current practice, when they do that, then they have to pay both Maple Grove fees and our new fees. So there is a impact window that we should be aware of in an open conversation. But once we're operational, I would say it's equivalent to what, what we're dealing with today. And those fees coming into our system versus their system and vice versa. So it's, but that's a fair question. And certainly the focus of today from staff is if we aren't comfortable with that, then we have to go back and revise our plan, because that's what the plan's based on, is basically the development system pays for itself.
And if we had a year where we only got, say, 20 acres platted, would we then revisit these fees so that if that were to continue, we would be able to fund the debt service with a lower number of acres? Or are we kind of locked in, we couldn't make that kind of on-the-fly adjustment?
We can make we have to be able to justify our changes. We can certainly do that. If we get a grant or something, we could revise that number at any time in the fee schedule when we feel like it's justified. With going through this process, every development that comes in, we'll be modifying the spreadsheets until we know we're out of the woods, because, we can't control some of that stuff. I would say if you look at that, that if we go back to that graph, what we've put in there for numbers and assumptions is what we currently have platted today, or where there's entitlement with preliminary plat. So that's why you see a lot of implementation in 2022, and that's because last year we actually didn't get, there was a little lull there where we were building a lot of homes, so our permits were high, but we didn't have a lot of new land actually coming through. We have a ton of that coming through, as you guys are aware, so that's why there's this huge spike for 2022. And then the tailings of that show up in 2023, and that's when the second half of developments come in. So Rush Creek Third comes in, that kind of, once you're in the rhythm, we have higher confidence that it's gonna follow through in our assumptions. And then when we look out to the rest of the 10 years, you can kind of see it's just flatlining there. Well, that's really, not to go too much into it, so pause me if I'm getting too much into it, but I think it's worth to hear, is we really just looked at phase one MUSA. So what our comp plan says in those areas that are gonna come in before 2025, and the projected, and then we spread that out over those years because we don't know when they're gonna come in. So there's complete variability there, but those are all things in the magenta on our map that are supposed to come in according to our comp plan before 2025 that are within a reasonable proximity to trunk sewer, because trunk sewer drives everything. So there is some MUSA that's actually not accounted for in there. It's the reason, we're relying on primarily my assumption that it's within reasonable that could be, that could come in the next 10 years. Based on what we're seeing, that's extremely conservative. Could it stop and pause today and we go zero? Absolutely. The trend line is not the plateau that you're seeing here. And that's when we talk about, like, we have a challenge on overestimating, and we also have a challenge on underestimating. It's a huge challenge. My personal opinion in this moment in time, I'm nervous for underestimating. Could the world change tomorrow and I be nervous for overestimating? I would just have to disclose that to you. Once we make a decision, we go. But you could see the trend line going up, and there's gonna be some hills and valleys through there. But we're not putting stuff outside of the MUSA in here. We're not reaching for the MUSA, in my opinion. And actually, ironically, it's actually mimicking what we've seen on average to date. So I went back 5 years before, and we're averaging about 40 to 50 an acre. I think it's about 40 in northeast and about 60 in southeast. That's actually balanced out to a similar trend line through my analysis of just kind of selecting what's near the trunk sewer. So it's really, the 10-year plan is mimicking what we've seen over the past 5 years. The more trunk sewer you have out there, the more properties that are close to it, the more potential that when the market's good, you're gonna have a higher influx than what we've probably seen. If everything goes away, yes, we have to deal with that. We also have to deal with what's coming at us. So it's a challenging balance, certainly. And I'm doing my best to help you guys understand both. And all we can do is keep the conversation going if we choose to go forward. But definitely the policy conversation tonight is we have to be comfortable sticking to that, or coming up with a policy change that would say that's too much, we would have to consider offsetting some of this cost that developers would be investing when they come in. Since I've been here, that's never been the policy. We've always been development pays for itself. This is the process to do that. It does because, we're a newer developing community. These are increased prices. We're directly taking the $20 million bond and putting it into the development. So if we're bonding for $20 million, it's pretty defendable that that's a cost to the system. So we all feel like we're evaluating this and bringing it to you, but I don't feel like this is an overassumption to Councilmember Bottom's point. We can do analysis all day, but we feel like this is pretty telling. And the stuff we can't control, we can't control. So that's that risk management element that we have to decide on. Is it too much? Is it not enough? Then we are relying then on Maple Grove for some of that development, and that's a choice that you guys have as policymakers. So.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nichols, can I expand on?
Please.
Please do.
Can you go to slide 7, please? So I also want to demonstrate here. This bar down here, this represents the following year's debt service payment is accounted. This spread here is reserves. So even if, to Kevin's point, that it doesn't continue at the levels that staff is projecting, that simply means that some of this cash buildup that is being built up for this project on a cash basis, you may not be able to either do that project at the time you thought, because development is not occurring, or you may not be able to do it with cash. It may require more debt financing. But this gives some cushion to deal with if the timing of that development does not occur at the rate that staff is projecting.
So that's going to accrue primarily because of that large influx of land that would plat in 2022.
That is correct, and then the continued projections. So those dollars are not being used to pay for operating, they're being used to pay for infrastructure related to development.
Okay. So how many years of safety factor would you say we have in, say, 2022?
Well, if the projections on 2022 units and 23 are correct, that ballparking in here, and we'll give you something more specific, you're probably past 5 years of cushion that you could continue to draw down for those debt service payments.
Okay, excellent. What is that 2030 plan? Is that more northeast? Is that southeast?
Great question. I was going to jump in and elaborate on that. That's actually, if you recall, we've been authorized to do a southeast area water feasibility study. So we incorporated, we're hoping to bring that back in a month. We've incorporated some of that planning into southeast, which is why the southeast numbers are jumping a little bit in this proposal. And so that would really be at least in our current plan, it would be the southeast system, and we would have some choices to make again with Maple Grove, and we're still going to meet with Maple Grove, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's still coming, but we have used some of the preliminary data we're comfortable with to project out what a likely future recommendation would be for area charges. And again, we're not adopting any of that today, but we have to get that in front of you and react to your question. So that would be a southeast system.
Excellent. Okay.
And I do want to say is that these treatments are being driven by development, right? So if 2030, if all of a sudden development comes in faster, that line's going to move to the left and come in 2020. The need's going to come in 2027, 2028. But if that investment has to come earlier, it's because we've had development. So they kind of go hand in hand. So if that line flattens, that big investment in 2023 can be pushed out. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like they're together. So it's not like we have an imminent 2030 replacement of a treatment plant or a regulation that we have to update a treatment plant. That treatment plant is driven by development, so it can move back and forth. So if that line plateaus, it pushes out. And we update our plan. If it exponentiates, then we're building a plant, and and this shows that we're paying for it with cash if it's that aggressive and the economy stays that way, which I think is the mindset we've gone down, where development is paying for what it needs at a pace that the market bears. So,
my last question. I know we're somewhat constrained on sewer capacity. How close do the assumptions that underlie these projections take us to that current limit?
that's gonna be all these go hand in hand. Sewer drives development more often than water. We have to have a conversation about the capacity in southeast at L80. That will drive this. And I would think, I mean, and it all depends on how fast southeast develops versus northeast, because of the capacity issues in southeast, and we have more of this information coming in the coming months, but sewer will ultimately drive that, and they're all kind of hand in hand.
Is northeast sewer limited also, where we're focusing in this?
It's limited kind of beyond our current MUSA, which is pretty expansive. So when we, in 7 years, revisit the MUSA, if it needs to be expanded, which, 3 years ago, we thought we were excessive in some areas, but if it needs to be expanded, we do have to find a different source for the rest of Corcoran. So, I mean, a lot of moving targets. When you start to get to this phase and this kind of operation, this is a priority. I mean, this is why we need investments in finance, and Tammy's great, but you start real timing this, it's fluid. I mean, every month it could change. There could be there could be an opportunity up in anywhere in the city where there was a high-end user, and all of a sudden we don't have the capacity, but it really makes sense. We'd have to come in and figure it out like in 60 days or less to be able to react to it. So this is a big step. We've been working with Maple Grove. This is a big step. So we want to make sure we understand the risks so everyone can understand how we're going to react to it if certain things happen.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
Good questions. Anything else? So I guess, bigger picture for this feedback, are we comfortable with this method of funding it with those fees and at that ballpark amount? That's
I am.
Policy.
Based on the answers to the questions, I am. Yeah.
Yep, I think we're all.
Great. We appreciate your looking into that. I would note that we do have our attorneys will be on a call for us at 9, so just to note that we need to adjourn to go to closed session.
Let's see here.
At 9. We do have a few minutes. We can probably do the municipal well.
Thank you,
I
Tammy.
just wanted to-
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's
To note.
do 9B really quick. Do you have the? Let's do 9B here quick. Municipal well number 1.
And we'll go ahead and I'll turn that over to Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. We kind of pulled this one back to make sure we had the conversations, typically a consent item, but if you recall, we are out for municipal well number 1. So we did test well number 1 last year. We're in construction phase of test well number 2, and this will be the actual initial municipal well that would service the primary treatment site in Corcoran. We did go out for bid for that. We had 2 bidders. Actually, the low bidder was an extremely successful bid. So we are recommending moving forward and awarding that to Renner for $218,000 and change. The primary reason to do this in advance of anything else would be to understand that actual capacity. So a test well gives you enough data, but you don't have all the design data for it of what that actual well is going to produce. And we believe it's going to produce enough to work. And so, and part of the treatment plant design would be the electrical components, the pumping components, and all that could be aligned with that. So we would avoid a potential change order and other situations down the line that would cause delays or, harder uncontrolled expenses. So we'd like that data up in advance of the design if possible. So that's why we're recommending council action to award that project to E.H. Renner, who is, by the way, also doing the 2 test wells out there. So it's the same driller who's familiar with the area.
I'll make a motion to accept the bid of E.H. Renner.
Second. Any further discussion?
I'm grateful that it comes in so far under the original estimate.
Yeah.
Well done.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Unanimous.
If you'd like, we could probably continue on to.
Yeah, what do we got?
9C.
9C. Yeah, we can do it.
Probably.
9C Park Trail Road Improvements Draft Feasibility Report.
Sure, Mayor and Council. I apologize for not having some slides ready for this, but This was a follow-up to a petition for the Park Trail neighborhood. They came in last fall and wondered what it would take to essentially provide a low-cost pavement to their cul-de-sacs that are both north and south of 66 and Gleason Parkway that's being extended to 116 and finished this year, so we were looking at an opportunity to capitalize on that project. When we got into it, the underlying soils were very poor and did not make that really a viable project for simply a low-cost paving project. It just wasn't worth the effort. Knowing that there was some lots there that might develop anytime in the future, we were recommending that it makes a lot more sense to wait until there's a utility and street project. Maybe reach back out at that time when that need is brought up by potentially a lot that wants to come in and connect. So we still feel like that's the appropriate time to do it. We don't want to assess, or at least staff recommends we don't want to assess and build a brand new road that might be ripped up in 2 years. So, and we're basically doing the same process. So again, it's still value added to the area. It's value added to knowing where the assessments are coming in from the appraiser, and we're set up to basically execute a future project if we may, but at this time, we're not recommending moving forward.
Thanks. Any questions?
Yeah, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
So every once in a while, we get a request from a neighborhood and a petition set for paving our road, their road, which I think is fine if they're willing to pay for that. So before we take and put money into feasibility report or whatever, we probably should say, by the way, we kind of know how much it costs to build a road. We kind of know how much it's going to be per house if it's not on the list of, like, if it's not a very well-traveled road, it's not going to make the priority list for council. Not because we don't care about those people, but we don't have a whole big pavement budget. So I think that we should have upfront conversations with neighborhoods before we do these kind of studies. And I'm not saying anything is bad about this, but you kind of give them a false hope. We do. And I think if people realized each one of you is going to be on the hook for 50 grand, they would say, well, maybe we're okay with dirt or whatever. I don't know, that's just a thought, because every once in a while we have these petitions that come in. People put a lot of work in, we put a lot of work into it, and it's just like, and we've never paved a road based on a petition.
Yeah.
Well, I get what you're saying. In this case too, they came to us, but your recommendation is not to do it based on future utilities going in, not having to rip it up?
Well, I mean, you could do it. I mean, it's in here. There'd be a $400,000 gap that the city would likely have to cover, because if you look at the assessment roll, that's the gap. So it could certainly be done. That's a very expensive paving project in and of itself. And we have limited reserves in the asphalt fund, so it becomes a best use of those funds. And then in addition to that, it's approximately half of the lots are vacant lots that would be required to connect to sewer and water.
Yeah, and those half lots probably won't develop in my lifetime based on current ownership unless it turns over, but there's a surprising thing I think the study helped with is the amount of soil that have to be removed.
Yeah, I mean, we did Appaloosa Woods and we did Corcoran Trail East-West. We used some of those numbers to project out, is this viable? And staff felt like it was worth pursuing at that time. It's a low-lying area, you never know, but the extent of those soils and the volume of those soils was excessive.
Right.
And so, you could deal with a couple feet maybe, but 6, 7, 8 feet of pure organics is just
crazy.
It doesn't make sense even based on our reserves. If we had $500,000, I think it makes sense to pave an isolated gravel road, so we don't have to bring the grader down there and all that, but not at that price point, so.
I apologize, I wanted to ask staff this, but Corcoran east-west, it seems like these benefits are a lot higher than what they were.
They came in higher, yeah. I mean, that's just the trend lines, that's some of the value added, so when we do those projections on, hey, how much will it cost to pave the road? Now we have 3 data points. They're trending up. But yeah, I mean, that's helpful when someone comes in, what's it gonna cost to pave a road? And we say, we don't know, here's our assessment policy, and they want us to give us a number. Now we can give us kind of 3 different numbers, and it shows the variability, but it does give a range.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know why it changed so much. Is it the underlying materials, or is it actual perceived benefit?
It's
Is
not-
that much more?
It's not it's the benefit, right? The appraisals didn't even know the soils were bad below it. It's what you have today and what you're gonna get is the appraisal bad.
I'm assuming that's based on home value increase of some kind? I mean,
I think
it'd be
that's-
nice to know from an appraiser how we can go less than a year and have such a swing.
We can we can follow up and we can distribute some response from the appraiser.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know that. Thank you.
I think it was worth evaluating, because we had a good potential for savings due to Gleason getting paved, so that all those mobilization fees could be amortized across both and that sort of thing. It's unfortunate that didn't work out. Probably a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there a kind of road material that would be resilient to these kinds of underlying soils? Like if you were to put down concrete instead of asphalt, could it withstand that unstable base?
Probably a little more so, but concrete's more expensive to put down too, so what are you going, you're chasing your tail a little bit on that. Ultimately, the best scenario is to get that stuff out of the road bed so that you can stabilize it for the long term. And if you're gonna dig 7 feet down, you're digging 8 feet down for sewer and water. So you would ideally install all that while you're digging it out and backfilling. It's just a lot of efficiency there. And so to get that closer to timing that more appropriately for future conversations is really the recommendation. And just to dig it that much up in the road twice, and even the impacts and the challenges of getting the residents in when you're digging the full road with 8 feet deep presents challenges and extra costs. So it just makes sense to do, unfortunately, it makes sense to do this when we're gonna do utilities.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Everyone generally on the same understanding or same page on that?
Thank you, Kevin. Very well thought
So
out.
we direct staff then?
To take no further action at this point. I think we're all consensus. Perfect.
Thank you.
And now let's jump to the closed session, so I will go through this. 1 second here. Okay, under the authority of Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 3B, the city is permitted to close a meeting for attorney-client privilege to discuss pending litigation. City council is going into closed session for the purpose to discuss the response to the action filed by Housing First Minnesota. Upon adjournment of that closed session, the city council will enter into a second closed session to discuss non-public health and medical data, which must be discussed in a closed session per Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 2A, 3, and 4.